Hello and welcome to the Old Garage, number 12. I'm Wild Bill, and I have some questions to answer and a new segment that we're going to start doing on the Old Garages. We'll do that after the questions. I don't have a whole lot of them for now. As you can see, I'm being remote, but we'll get to them. And first one I have here, pardon me, I'm having to read them off my computer. I usually have them so I'm not looking stupid. Now a question from James MacArthur. When did the use of plastics, I'm assuming that would have been something like Bakelite, start in the automotive industry? Well, plastics did not start until late in the 1930s. Bakelite was pretty much the plastic that was available. It was invented like in 1907 or something like that. But Bakelite itself is very susceptible to extreme temperature and vibration, both of which were pretty common in older vehicles. So it wasn't really found in cars until the late 30s, and even then it was used kind of the same way that carbon fiber accents are used, were used in the 2000s on cars. They may be there for knobs or for a little embellishment in the interior, but they really weren't integral into the car. Sorry, plastics just didn't get involved too much in the early days. All right, we got another one here. We got a couple more, okay. All right, Carter asked the question, I was wondering, for the next Old Garage, and this is it, when did car insurance come into the picture and who was crazy enough to insure them? Well, car insurance as we know it, again, is a post-World War I invention, but at the time that cars were being invented, and even before, if you had something, an invention or whatever, you could insure it for its reasonable loss value, in which case you would simply have an insurance adjuster or an assessor would come out, take a look at your purchase or the paperwork or your invention or whatever, would assess a value, and you could insure it against total loss against specific, events. And the very first car insurances of any kind were literally that. These were like Lloyd's of London insured in 1884 Didion Bouton in Lyon, France. And it was a total loss insurance, and it was a loss based on a natural disaster. So the insurance wasn't against accidents. There was no liability. If you broke it yourself, that's no problem. But if it got hit by lightning or a tree fell on it or something like that, you could insure against that, for its reasonable value. And that's how insurance first really got started. As far as how the insurance industry began, and the specialized insurances that are used for cars, that's a whole other episode in and of itself. And we'll get to that. But earliest, specific of a car, yeah, Lloyd's of London did insure in 1884, give it total loss insurance. There were other insurances written for steam coaches and such beforehand, as well as for railroads, etc. But that's how it all began. So, all right, let's go to the next one. I have a question here from What the Farkenhell. He says, what do you think of brands like MG and Lotus being owned by Chinese companies trying to make it in the West? Well, what do I think about it? I says, well, that's business. It's been going around backwards and forwards, for 100 and some years in the automotive world. India's, been buying stuff, Japan's been buying stuff, and America's been buying stuff. I mean, look at how many times Saab's been owned by who knows who before they finally went under. What bothers me is if a company buys a company that is not failing and decides to reinvent the company. That to me I don't like, and it doesn't matter what side of what ocean you're on, going to which direction. I mean, that's what I'm going to look at. You know, if a company, you know, I mentioned Saab, you know, if a company is struggling and somebody buys them and says, okay, you're not making money, so start doing this so you can start making money, and the company says, well, I'm not doing that, well, that's stupid on Saab's part, and that's why they're no longer in business. But you know, if you're somebody and you buy a good company that's making money and they're profitable, and you say, okay, well, here's how we do it in my country, so now you're going to do it here. That's stupid of the buyer. So any company that does that, yeah, that's bad. But that can happen on either side of the pond, you know. So that's where I brought the line in that regard. As far as the modern stuff, that's a whole political thing I don't want to get into on the channel. So, but hey, that's where I stand. Let's go to next few ones. Okay, now I have Craig Hagenbruch. He's asking this question. He's watching this Sherlock Holmes again, and he says, I noticed they wear little goggles, given that horse riding predates the car by thousands of years, and surely by the 1800s and 1900s, people already knew that you could get up to substantial speed. You know, why was it fashionable to wear goggles? It was fashionable, actually, because when you were racing a car in the late 19th century, you know, the 1890s, you would typically, as a race driver, wear goggles because you were going at a higher speed and the roads were not paved. And so there was dust and dirt, and if you were behind somebody, there were rocks flying up, you know, and so you would wear goggles. And of course, automobilism at that time was a sport. So if you wanted to demonstrate your sportiness, it was fashionable to also wear goggles like the racers do. Once you get past 1900 and into the 19aughts and early teens, it became even more fashionable to wear goggles because of aircraft. And planes at that time weren't closed cockpits, they were open cockpit. And you know, if you're now traveling 60, 70, 80 miles an hour and nothing but wind, it'll bite your eyes, and so you have to wear goggles. And the automobiles even emulated the aircraft. You know, by that, once you started having airplanes, many cars would style themselves to kind of have a little aircrafty look to them. They would put some makes would actually put altimeters on their dashboards, you know, to be more sporty. But it was a fashion. It was a sporty thing to do, to wear your goggles, to show the sportsmanship of automobilism. It was fashionable. In the same way, the women, you'll see, didn't wear goggles. In fact, what the women would wear were actually face covers made of cloth, with then large hats that then had scarves wrapping around the hat to put it together. That was the sporting woman's wear if you were in a passenger in a car. So that's where it comes from. Now, one more question. Actually, there's two people that asked very much the same question. I'll go ahead and read them both. But it's regarding the episode, the Detroit Motor Company, about Henry Leland. And the first one here, it's Daniel Silverthorne. And he asked, what exactly was it about Mr. Leland's process which was so revolutionary, aside from simply having standardized parts? He goes on, as I understand it, even standardized parts of this era were dubious as to their ready fitment to each other. And true standard parts, as we understand it, didn't really come about till the 1930s because of issues of accurate measuring to a fine scale. I have to disagree with that statement about not coming into the 1930s, and I'll explain that in a second. But also, just a sidebar, Spirit Fox MI probably much followed up with this. It says, Ford was basically the Edison of the motor world, the guy who gets all the credit despite having little to do with actually inventing the stuff. I says, no, that wasn't really the case either. I'll tell you, with Henry Leland, as far as integrating parts, as we understand them, I will concede that the local parts store as we know it became something more regular in the 1930s and especially, and then 40s, and then in the 1950s. But as far as standardized parts, no, it started in the 1890s. That was Henry Leland who did that. Here's why. If you look prior to 1900 at a car, in manufacturing, here was the standard process. It was industry-wide. you have an engineer, or maybe a couple of engineers that are friends, and sit down with a beer and design a car. You're going to get on paper. You're going to design your car. Once you got your car designed, okay, so now we're going to go into the machine shop. We're going to get this. We're going to get that. We're going to make this and start making the prototype. And this is a process, because what you drew doesn't necessarily work every time. You have to modify this, modify that. Okay, and say, okay, let's try this, try that, and finally, once you've prototyped this thing, you have a working car. Okay, great. We've got a car. This is the car that we are going to build. Let's build this car, and then you simply, okay, this is the car we're going to build. Now let's manufacture it and figure out how to manufacture it. That was how cars were done. That's what Henry Leland turned upside down. He, because of his background as a machinist, as a miller, and understood that side of it, understood forging as well. He said, well, you know what? I know how milling machines work. I know how lathes work. I know how, all this stuff works. And I know how to modify these machines to make them do things as well, that's with precision. So, rather than me sit here and design a car, I'm going to figure out what I can specifically manufacture based on my ability to build things, and then I'm going to design my car based on my ability to build it. This was unique and the first in the automotive industry to approach it from that direction. Now, that is how it's done in the modern world today. You're not going to have companies, unless it's like the specialty group of a big, huge corporation that's building a race car, with no expenses barred, for experimental purposes. Cars aren't built that way anymore, or aren't built, that way. Here's what we can build. Here's what our manufacturing process is. Now let's design a car that fits within our manufacturing capacity. That's what Henry Leland brought to the automotive industry. It revolutionized the industry. And he did this in the 1890s, before Henry Ford even built his first car. So that's why he's so important, because he infiltrated that principle of manufacture throughout the Motor City, throughout Detroit, during the 1890s, accumulating, of course, in his taking over control of Detroit Motor Company and renaming it Cadillac. So that's why he's so important. Why is Henry Ford important? He's got his own reasons, and I'll talk about him, when I get to him. But pardon me. But that's why he was so important. It wasn't a case of Henry Ford got all the credit. It's just that most people don't know about Henry Leland. Because you think about the moving assembly line. You don't think about, well, assembly lines existed long before Henry Ford. Mass manufacturers existed, for a long time. Who really got it going in the automotive world? Henry Leland. Now, that's my questions for today. I know by this time you're seeing this, I will have had another episode that's come up at, I will have to do that on the next one, and that's going to be the Giovanni Agnelli. But there is something new that I want to do starting now for the Old Garage, and that is we're going to do a shout out. And the shout out is going to be very simple. It's simply a YouTuber that's out there, big, small, otherwise I don't care. But I like my channel, and there's other channels I like, and if you like my channel, you might like some of the channels that I've found as well. And the first shout out is going to go to a channel that I think there's quite a few folks are going to like that watch this show. Because I've been asked about motorcycles. Okay, vintage motorcycles, veteran motorcycles, and that is a whole different discipline. I'm not a motorcycle enthusiast. I know a little bit about them, about the old ones, but it's not my area of expertise. But I'll tell you who does have them, and that is Wheels Through Time. Link in the description below. These are your motorcycle gurus when it comes to vintage and veteran motorcycles. They have a museum that is on wheels, literally. It's a rolling museum. Well, it's a brick and mortar, but they drive or ride rather, their bikes. They go through them in detail, and they have some extraordinary motorcycles. Extremely rare production bikes, Indians, Harley Davidsons, some extremely rare motorcycles, some one-off bikes, built by individuals even before World War I. very historic motorcycles. They even give one away in a raffle every year. Again, Wheels Through Time. If you want to learn about vintage motorcycles, that's your channel. You got to jump on there and check them out. It's a great binge watch. They've been at it for a long time. All right, so that's it except for admin. Quick admin. Well, two things. As you can tell, obviously I'm mobile, so hopefully we'll see the fish again shortly. But I have to plead ignorance because maybe I have autism or something, but I don't use emojis or photo emoji things, whatever the heck you call them, smileys and stuff like that. In anything, I don't do them in texting and media and emails and nothing. I never use them. I figure English language is good enough. And I thought that little heart button thing on my channel was an emoji thing, an emoticon thing or something, and I never turned it. I just finally found out that if I want someone to know that I liked their stuff, that's what I pressed, not just the like button. Because I used to press the like button and says, how come it doesn't show a little circle thing, why isn't it doing that? Everybody else's does. Well, now I know why, and I feel really stupid. So I'll change that from here. Anyway, that's the questions for this episode, and we will see you the next time on the Old Garage. Peace.